as the money changes in certain communities, you can see how they take ownership of those communities.
Yeah.
But but money's without that level of, I mean, communities without that level of income, you can see how it's kind of a, let me get mine, and then we can talk about helping others. But it's a tough altogether environment. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why when I hear your story, even the story of how you became an attorney, you know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, let's start with high school.
Yeah.
You're an amazing track athlete, amazing football player. You got coaches coming out, you know.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was nobody really told us a lot about college, the alternative routes. So if it wasn't sports or ROTC, honestly, man, I went to Crim High School.
Mm-hmm.
With all respect to my teachers and administrators, I don't recall hearing people tell me that you can go to college without football, without track. I remember them talking about college, but I don't remember there being any clear route to, hey, you just get good enough grades, you get financial aid. No, it wasn't. Nobody made that clear to us.
Yeah.
So for me, high school was about securing that scholarship. That's what it was about. It was about securing that scholarship. And even though I was recruited by a lot of schools, I was still confused about how would college look, how would it happen, what paperwork do I need to fill out. You know, it was kind of just like talk to these coaches about these sports, and they would educate me on the steps I need to take to get into these schools. But it wasn't just that base at my school of knowledge, or that, you know, this is all you really need to go to school. So sports is just one of your options. So for me, it was all about sports, all about either track or football. And I remember a coach, Coach Ed Pinkham from Colgate University. Colgate was a school that I had heard about early in my high school career. One of my teachers, his son went to Colgate, and he showed me a brochure of it when I was in the 9th grade, and it looked like a palace. You know, I had never gone to school with any white kids. I had never gone to any school that wasn't run down, you know. So when I saw this school, I was like, man, that's a school? That's not a palace? He said, no, that's a school. And I said, man, if I get into a place like that, I'm going to go. If I ever get into a place like that, I'm going to go. So when I was recruited by big schools for football and for track, I still kind of had my mind on Colgate, because my grades were good. And I remember Coach Ed Pinkham, the football coach, came. I was living in these projects on Cleveland Avenue, behind the McDonald's, right there on Cleveland Avenue. Not the ones that are renovated, but the brick ones on the other side of the street. And I lived in the back of those projects. Like, you had to make so many turns that by the time you got to my house, if you weren't from there, you felt trapped. We lived in a dead end. And I remember one evening, Ed Pinkham knocked on my door and was recruiting me, and I was like, man, this white man, 5'6", you know, 150 pounds. It's light enough outside where people can see him in the neighborhood. And I thought he was so bold. That I thought he wanted me so bad that I stopped looking at other schools. I was so attracted to that level of dedication in that school that wanted me that bad. I said, okay, this is a school where I feel like they're going to value me. They're going to value not just my academics, my athletics, and me as a person, because he was willing to come to my home. He wanted me right there. Colgate's the only school I visited. It's the only place I signed to. And I went there to play football, but of course it's an academic school, so I was able to get my degree, a good degree also, you know.
Wow. What was that experience like for you? Just from growing up in a predominantly black community, going to black schools, then you go to, you know, a school like Colgate.
I mean, it was like a completely different world, man. It was entirely different than everything I had ever seen. Okay, so I had never sat next to a white kid in a learning environment, in any environment that I can recall. I had never learned on a higher level of instruction where they expect those basic foundational skills to already have been set in place. You know, people said to me things like culture shock. I didn't really know what that meant. When I graduated early. I graduated in 3.5 years, so I didn't walk with my class. And it was years after I graduated when I started to realize I really didn't have too many white friends in my immediate network, even though I had been around so many people who I was cool with, black and white. You know, all these people were my friends at Colgate, but I realized that the culture shock was the fact that I did not latch on to any of these people and feel like I had a group that I really belonged to other than the football team. So other than the football team, I didn't form a lot of lasting relationships.
Wow.
So I look back years later and realize, yeah, there was a culture shock, because to this day, I still don't have a lot of lasting interactions, long friendships from the people I went to college with, which means I was isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So I went there isolated. I stayed amongst my group. It was a small black community. Most of us live in one dorm called the Harlem Renaissance Center. That's how the campus is set up.
Oh, wow.
You got this big grand school, and then you got this one dorm where most of the black kids go. Now, the kids who don't choose to be in HRC are looked at as being black kids who are from white neighborhoods, white communities, people who, they're black, we kick it with them, but you looked at them differently almost, because Colgate is very segregated like that. So I just latched to my group. And even though, like I said, I had those interactions, I didn't form those lasting friendships. So I didn't think it was a culture shock, but looking back, it was, man. It really was.
Because it's so funny, because like, so for me, I went to a HBCU. I went to Florida A&M, you know, and it wasn't the same. It was a culture shock, but not the same culture shock. Because my mother was really good at making sure, like, she was aware enough to know, okay, I got to get these kids in the schools where they can learn from, where they can get a great education. So when I went to FAM, it wasn't a culture shock of being around black people, because I had lived in black neighborhoods, but it was a culture shock in a sense that I'm around black kids who skateboard. You know what I'm saying? I'm around black kids who in a, you know, punk rock. I mean, stuff that, you know, where I grew up at, we didn't associate with those things, and so it allowed me to see the diversity in the diaspora. You know what I'm saying? Right. And it was just so powerful, and it allowed me to be more comfortable who I am. Because I mean, I grew up like, I used to take my VCR apart. You know, I was a little techie. Take my VCR apart, put it back together. If it was broke, I'd fix it. And I would do that stuff around the house, but kids that I grew up with weren't doing that. So it was kind of hard for me to be all in with this stuff when that's not what's going on in my environment. And so that's why I was so interested in just what that experience was like for you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. I mean, I was going through things at home. See, home was still real for me. So, you know, I went to school in Colgate's upstate New York. So it was Thanksgivings and Christmas breaks where I would have to stay up there because I just could not afford to come home. You know, so I was still dealing with the struggle. And then you come home. That time my mom was living on Washington Road. You know, Club Candlewood. So I come home and I got, you know, friends who dying, you know what I mean? I got homies who are in the street that when I run into them, the tone of conversation is just so different. You know, one time I came home, my sophomore year, I came home for Christmas break and went to a friend's house and, you know, end up on the ground, man. Some dude robbed me, tried, you know, shooting at me, you know. I mean, it was one of the craziest experiences of my life. So it's just that oxymoronic relationship between what was going on at home, what was still going on at home, and then up at Colgate, it's like the orchestra music playing when you're on campus. You know what I mean? That's how you feel when you're there. Everything's fine. Everything's of the high class, high status, the best of everything. Even going from there, visiting my twin brother, who was at Tuskegee University. The dynamics between the type of stuff he was going through at a historically black school compared to what I was going through. He was trying to get the administration to push through paperwork and, you know, just dealing with a lot of the things that you don't want to say, you know, are rampant at black institutions, but just some of the failures that you will find at a lot of our institutions. It just didn't have those things at Colgate, you know what I mean? So it was just, I was able to juxtapose it with not just my community, but also getting that black college experience. My brother's a Q, so I would go down to Tuskegee with him, you know, during a lot of the events they have down there, a lot of the frat parties, a lot of the club things. And I would see how it's so much more similar to where we come from, the neighborhoods we come from, compared to, like I said, fly off to Colgate and all of a sudden, we're just in a different world. I fly my mom up there, and my brothers up there. They come up there and they're like, "Man, this is a whole another place, whole another world." You know. So, but all in all, it was an overall positive experience, and I can say that, man. A lot of my, you know, fellow brothers who went to Colgate with me, who I met while we were there, we all had our bumps in life after graduation. But a lot of us are attorneys or doctors. you know. So I can say that it set that foundation to say, well, what's the next step in life, and to move up higher education, because we had something big to stack it on top of.
Amen. So where would you say that transformation happened for you? So because you get an athletic scholarship, you're rapping, you're writing plays, you're doing all these things because you know that eventually somewhere is going to lead to money.
Yeah.
But then you decide to go to law school. Where did this change happen?
Oh man, that was a whole life. It felt like a whole life I lived after Colgate, in between college and law school. Because when I come home from Colgate, I came back to just Atlanta. I came back to my problems. I came back to a dad who was in his last years. My father, you know, he was full blown with AIDS at the time, and contracted it in the streets. You know, he was shooting heroin when we were young, and you know, he talked to us and he was wide open with us about that. But by the time I come home from college, he was in the heat of it, and it was really eating him up in terms of his health. Mom's still struggling at home, so the only place I had to come home and live was back on Washington Road. Yeah. You know, and the people who were my homies, who are always gonna be my homies, who from high school, they were in somewhat of like, you know, it was a lot of strife going on in the streets between the people who I grew up around. So it was easy for me to get sucked right back into that street mind state. And what happened was, even though I was working, even though I could find little jobs, couldn't find great jobs coming out of Colgate, coming down here, because I didn't build that network, like I said, part of that culture shock I was telling you about. But because I wasn't getting great jobs and I didn't have anything to separate me from the hood, and I was still doing music, like I loved music, I still wanted to do it, I had never let it go. I wanted to be a rapper. And rap kept me right in the same environment, and it made me be comfortable with it. Yeah. So for a few years after Colgate, I probably made more mistakes than I had made in my whole life in terms of just what type of lifestyle I wanted to live. You know, I suffered a large, you know, I'd say it was a really traumatic car accident when I was at Colgate. I lost my athletic career in an 18-wheeler accident. Yeah. It's my sophomore year, the summer of that year. I was driver's side T-boned by an 18-wheeler. So when I came home from college in '05, around 2007 is when I got the accident settlement, right? And when I got that accident settlement, it put a lot of money in my pocket. So for a young man who really just wants to rap and who's picked up some bad habits and who's now hanging around, you know, people who I probably shouldn't have been around, when I got that accident settlement, instead of putting it towards, you know, a future that I say Colgate would have set the trajectory for, I jumped right back on the trajectory that I probably would have been on had I never left the hood in the first place. I got me a studio. Yeah. You know, I didn't really do anything flashy. I didn't have a whole lot of money back then. You know, you think $100 grand was $1 million, but you know, I didn't know how little money it was. Yeah. But I took that money and I just left my job. The day I got that money, man, I went into my I pulled up to my job and they said, well, you got a nice Beamer outside, you know, what's going on? I said, yeah, I quit, by the way, you know, and I had a great job. I was a family support counselor at a nonprofit at the time. But no, I took that money and I went and opened up a studio and I said, man, I'm going to rap. This is what I want to do. Now I don't regret it, but that lifestyle, living that lifestyle that I would have been living had I never gone to Colgate, it landed me in jail. Before 2008, man, I was in jail. Yeah. Late 2007, when my first child was born, I was in jail, you know, in Virginia, doing dumb things, you know, just living that life. And it took me years, a few more years after that to be able to get out of a poverty cycle, because what happens when you go to jail is your license gets suspended usually, and usually when you come out, whatever resources you had, you probably used it for lawyers and bond and all that stuff. So by the time I came home, I couldn't get the job that I wanted. I couldn't get a job that made me feel proud to go to Colgate. I didn't want to be in Atlanta with a Colgate degree, working at Walmart or working at McDonald's. So I know the pressure a lot of people feel, you know, not wanting their peers to see them in these, you know, lower standard professions. So what I did was I just stayed in the streets.
Wow.
Just stayed in the streets. I decided that I was going to do music no matter what. And even when all that money dwindled away, I tried to keep doing music.
Yeah.
So it was probably around 2009, 2010 that I finally woke up and I just said to myself, like, man, this isn't what life is supposed to be, not for me. It just something just wasn't fitting in. It had been so long since I had felt the blessing come my way.
Yeah.
So the idea of law school came to me. And when the idea of law school came, I first had to build my way back up to it. So I started working. I let rap go. I cut my hair. I said, man, I'm not doing rap. I tried to divorce a lot of the people who I had some ties with, but the ties were just negative. Yeah. So I started cutting people off and just getting ready to make a transition. And I had to be humble. I would do demolition work. I would do any job that was positive on somebody's payroll that I could find. And people, I sold vacuum cleaners. My family, they would look at me like, man, what are you doing? Yeah. You know, you got a Colgate degree, you know? And I would be like, listen, I'm trying to crawl back. I'm trying to move towards law school, but anything positive. So eventually, the path just seems like it was paved in gold. Yeah. And as I entered law school, as I started to take my law school exams, I realized that this was something that I'm not only good at, it felt like it was meant to be. Yeah. Felt like it was just meant to be. And every decision that I made since then has been, you know, in that same mind state that no matter what I have to do, I'm never going back to that trajectory from where I would have been had I never left the streets. I let that life go. I cut it off.
Yeah. And, you know, just kind of going back, you know, listening to you talk about being incarcerated at the time when your daughter was born, your firstborn. What was that like? I mean, what was going through your mind?
I mean, it was the worst time of my life, man. I mean, you're talking about somebody who had never been in jail before going to college. You know, so I felt like the dumbest person in jail because I'm the only one in here with the Colgate type degree. You know, I'm the one in here who had every reason to not be in here. Yeah. So I felt like a dummy, first of all, and I knew I had put myself there, and I just felt extremely helpless. I felt a way that I just, to this day, it's just the worst thing that can ever happen to you when your family's out here trying to make it and trying to live, and they got real world issues going on, like how's my wife going to get to the hospital to have my child? You understand? All these things that I could not control. I still don't know how people find it okay to live that lifestyle that's going to put them in jail, knowing that everybody you care about, man, everybody you love, is going to be the one suffering when you go through this. Yeah. So it was absolute torture, bro. It was absolute torture.
You know, and I think, because a lot of people don't know this, but when I came out of college, my first job out of college, I was making $21,000 a year. And I'm like, bro, when you got student loans, when you got rent, when you got your utility bills to pay, you are ending every month in the red. You know, every month you're trying to cover costs for not just this month, but the month prior, because you always in the hole. There's no way around it. But it was tough. But I think one of the things, because I don't think I ever felt that desperation to do anything illegal, but I think seeing guys that I knew, guys that I grew up with, played football with, seeing everybody getting locked up around me, you know what I'm saying? It just kind of gave me that, all right, look, I'm making $21,000 a year. It got to get better than this, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, right. It's a mindset you got to adopt. Like, at some point, it's got to get better, right? Because, I mean, it's hard, man. And I think that people, it's easy for them to say, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, not realizing that you don't even have boots. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, because we're not talking about just being poor. We're talking about poverty.
Generational poverty. See,
generational debt.
When you can't pick up a phone and say, hey, listen, I can't pay my rent, Mom. I can't pay my rent, Dad. You know, a lot of people don't realize the value in being able to do that. Yeah. They may have too much pride to do it, right? But being able to call someone in your family and somebody be able to provide that for you, or having a suitable place to go live in with your parents, where it's not in the hood, right? Been having a sofa where you can go lay your head. When those things are not an option,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people don't understand that is when you take it on yourself to say, okay, well, you know, forget it. You get so frustrated that it makes you go sell drugs. It makes you go steal. It makes you go rob, because you're so frustrated with the fact that you can't ask anybody for anything.
Yeah.
You know, but you're right. Once you take that different mind state and you start looking at it like, hey, slow money's better than no money.
Yeah.
You know, and you start to realize that the way you feel when you're not dodging the law, and the way you feel when you're not taking chances on somebody killing you or robbing you for your drugs and, you know, putting a bullet in your head. Like, you know, a lot of people we lose, they don't want to, they're not about that life, but they're selling drugs. And there's people out here who will kill you for that.
Yeah.
So when you step out of that element and now you're no longer, you know, having to deal with these kind of elements just to make money, you start to appreciate them $21,000 a year you're making. You start to appreciate any legal, legit money, because you start to say, wait, there's longevity attached to this.
Yeah.
I can do this over and over and over again and keep making money while I build to move on to the next thing. So like I said, once law school hit my head and I made up in my mind that I'm going to try to do this thing, I didn't mind doing demolition. I didn't mind, you know, selling vacuum cleaners. I didn't mind working for True Green. I didn't mind whatever I had to do, because in my mind state I was headed somewhere that was different. But you know, when you're trying to build a resume to be a rapper, you don't want to work for somebody where you got to wear a uniform and now somebody see you with a True Green outfit on and you trying to go out here and be a rapper. So these kids are, you know, the profession, the choice of profession is what guides, you know, the choices you make in order to get to that profession. So what's a resume builder for a rapper? Oh, I sold dope. Bing, resume builder. I'm out here in the streets. I'm really out here. I got a gun on me. Resume builder. Shoot somebody, resume builder. Kill somebody, resume builder. All these things are resume builder for that job, which is a problem when you talk about a lot of our youth wanting to do that. And I'm not knocking it, because I still make music. I still love music. It's just I make it about something different. Yeah. And then I love it for a different reason.
But I think a lot of our kids that love music, that want to make music, because you got to think, man, back in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when we were really rocking things, I mean, we weren't just always talking about drugs and money. I mean,
when we were talking about it, we were down in it. We realized that they put it, outside forces brought it to our community, and we was against it. So yeah, the element was there in early hip hop. It just wasn't praising it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, we understood what was going on.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you hit this crack epidemic where a lot of the men who were leading the community, the ones who could speak to their young boys and say, don't do this, don't do that. Because, you know, it really, for me, it really dawned on me just what I got out of when I go home and my stepdad is like, man, the fact that your mama raised 3 boys and ain't none of y'all been locked up, like, is a blessing.
Absolutely.
You know, you don't even know how much of a blessing.
Absolutely.
But like I keep trying to tell people, it wasn't just my mother. Like, you know, I got a football coach. It was so many men in the community. It was like they knew I was a good kid. So it was always that, come here, man,
they
get away from
grab
him. You know what I'm saying? But the thing is, we need more of those guys, because none of these kids are bad kids.
That's right.
They just looking for direction.
That's right.
And that's why I was so passionate about this show, because we have the opportunity to bring people on like us who've been able to walk out of that life and build something. Because at this point, it's a legacy. I mean, you're a father. You got 3 daughters and a son.
That's
you know
right.
what I'm saying?
That's right.
And, I mean, talk about what you look forward to now.
You know, having my own firm and having my family, to be able to benefit from that, not just financially, but seeing me dictate the order of my life on a daily basis. Yeah. Seeing me being what a boss really entails, because this boss comes with responsibility. Yeah. I come home later now sometimes than I did when I was working for the DA, right? Yeah. And my kids say, well, listen, you work for yourself. How you come home later? I just let them, because it's my name on it. Yeah. It's your name on it. Your last name, Leah Arnold, Adia Arnold, Sonia Arnold. This is the Arnold Law Firm. Yeah. So if I'm ever not there, then you got to go. And whenever you got to wait until everybody else leaves before you close the door, because this is ours. Yeah. it's just a different sense of pride. They see how much pride I have in it. But, you know, it took some time to get things moving the way I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very thankful. I have to thank the Atlanta community, the Metro Atlanta community. I got to thank my brothers and sisters. Most of my business comes from people who looks like me, man. You know what I mean? So I'm a black-owned business supported by mainly, you know, black clients. Unfortunately, because I'm a criminal attorney and a personal injury attorney, a lot of those people are in unfortunate circumstances when we meet. But that's who I want to be fighting for on a daily basis. Even when I was a prosecutor, a lot of people get it twisted. I was over there fighting for our people.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing something that probably one of the bravest decisions of my life was when I had the chance to go work for anybody, and I decided, you know what, man, I want the power to say who should go to jail and who should not go to jail in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody who's not from my neighborhood to have that power, because when I was in trouble, I wanted somebody who looks and thinks like me to make a decision on whether or not you should ruin my future or whether or not I should go home or get a second chance. So I was willing to be that person, even though I knew nobody around me would understand it. You know, it wore me down over time.
Yeah.
It did.
Well, I think it wears you down because you realized how vast the system is.
Absolutely.
And you realize, man, as much as I want to be that shoulder for every crying mother, I can't. You know, and it's not just from that prosecutorial side, but then from that criminal defense side.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, how many people are falsely accused? There was the whole big, you know, When They See Us that came out on Netflix. Yeah. And I mean, people, it's so funny because as I was talking about that, people are like, man, you act like this happens all the time. And I'm like, it does happen all the time.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it does. Like these kids, this what happened to those boys was nothing unique.
No.
Like, no.
I get to go county to county now. See,
Yeah.
when I was a prosecutor, I had to stay in that one county, and the influence was immediate. So I would only get to see the people who were immediately around me.
Yeah.
And they shaped my perception of what I think the law is. And I'll say, even then,
Yeah.
I could see that, you know, it's a lot of room for corruption because you give individuals the decision-making power over whether or not another person needs to go to jail. And there are a lot of facts that aren't on paper, and there are a lot of things you won't know what happened. There are a lot of rooms where things go down in the room, a robbery or a murder, and you don't know what happened inside that room. Nobody will ever know, but a charging decision still gets made.
Yeah.
And it's usually based on the person's history, you know, or how that person appears.
Yeah.
You know, you come to prison, you come to court with tattoos all on your face. Hey, man, it's not me discriminating against you. People who don't know you, they look at that, and it leaves a certain impression. And if somebody has to decide, for instance, if it's a car with 3 young kids in it, and every kid is saying, I didn't know that it was going to be a robbery, well, the kid with the tattoos all over his face, do you think he gets the benefit of the doubt?
Nah.
No, he doesn't. The kid who's got all the prior felony, you think he gets the benefit of the doubt? No. So, but the truth is, we don't know what happened a lot of times inside that car.
Yeah, you're
so
right.
I realized how much power they had, but also it's a dangerous form of power. You have to be prayed up and you have to be begging God for discernment, because you're going to make decisions about people's lives when not even you know exactly what happened inside these places. So it should be more err on the side of letting people go who are not dangerous, proven dangerous. That's what I think. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But that's not what the criminal justice system is. You got to, you know, people go down the road all the time.
Yeah.
Under maybe most likely type circumstances.
And I mean, how many times do people plead just to get out of that situation?
Because they got the tattoos on their face, right?
Yeah.
Because they got the past felony history, and they know that they're going to get what's called recidivized, which means that based on what you've done before, you're facing the mandatory maximum now. You don't get the parole out if you're convicted. And you are in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the problem is, you know, me growing up, like I said, when you grow up in a bad place, you're always in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're just trying to live. You know,
and that's what people fail to realize.
Yeah.
You know, I think when they start redlining certain communities, what does it say about the people that live within those communities? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like it makes it that difficult. Yeah. And it was so funny because, so I have really bad allergies, and so I saw these face masks that they were selling. And they say they work really good if you're doing yard work and you have allergies. And so I bought the face mask,
Yeah.
despite the fact that everybody that they advertised it with did not look like me.
That's right.
I'm just looking at the results.
Yeah.
So I go out one morning, 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, get out here to do some of this yard work.
Yeah.
And a lady comes down my cul-de-sac, doesn't live in my neighborhood. And there have been, quite a few people who walk down my cul-de-sac, never speak to me. I can wave to them, never speak. They just look and drive off, older folks. And, sometimes it bothers you. It bothered me one particular day, so I posted on Facebook. And I had a guy that I actually go to church with. And he said, I'm only saying this because you put it out there, but you do look suspicious. And I would be looking out. I would keep a lookout for you too. And my deal is, like, if you go to church with me every Sunday and you can't see me, how you going to see anybody outside these walls? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so we've really got to change that narrative, man. And that's why when I looked at this, I said, man, we've got an opportunity to really start changing some narratives. Let people see that. I want people to see black people like I saw black people when I went to FAM. You couldn't put us in a box.
If I ask people all the time, I mean, it's also about who are they able to tell on you with. See, imagine if they knew that if they picked up the phone, they would be speaking to a young brother who would come out as the police officer.
Yeah.
And it would be a young brother who would be the DA
yeah.
in the DA's office. If we don't police our own communities, then I think one of the things we face is that we perpetuate the cycle. Yeah. Why? Because we continue to tell white America that you can come in our neighborhood despite the fact that you don't know anybody in our neighborhood. And I'm not white or black, you know what I mean? Like I said, to this day, man, I deal with all different types of people, love all kinds of people, and I think most of the black people I know are not racist. Yeah. They prefer a world where they're not being prejudiced and discriminated against. But right. I don't really see it inherent in us, and it's not in me inherently, right? But when someone who's from a different race has taken on the notion subconsciously or consciously that we are inferior, and then they come into our neighborhood and start making decisions about who goes to jail, who doesn't go to jail, who gets a second chance, who doesn't get a second chance, yeah. Who do I want to give a pat on the back and let drive away, as opposed to who do I want to arrest and take and book. When it's not us making those decisions, then people will continue to call the police. Why? Because they know that the people who are going to show up on the scene in the police car are going to feel like them. Yeah. They know that they're going to be out there with people who agree with them, yeah. and that this officer will, side with them if they shoot you down. Yeah. Or, whereas if we policed our own neighborhoods, there's a majority African American community. It should be a majority African American police officers. Mm-hmm. They should look like the people who they're policing. Yeah. You got nothing but young black men down on Rice, down in these courthouses in Atlanta, and in DeKalb, and in Gwinnett and Cobb, in Douglas. Nothing but young black men. But where are the black men in those police cars and in those DA's offices? Mm-hmm. Black men and women, you know what I mean? So without making it, hey, Will's racist, I don't want to send out that message. But I do feel that if you have inherited the notion that we are inferior, consciously or subconsciously, you should not be the one driving through our neighborhood deciding what looks prejudiced. But or what looks suspicious. But
it's so deep, right? So for one, there are different narratives around the prosecution, policing. There's narratives about all these things, and so kids who grow up seeing the police as a negative force in their community, you're not gonna grow up wanting to be a police officer. And my thing is, it's even deeper than that. For the folks that come through my neighborhood walking their dogs. The mere fact that you can look at me and not even speak, like some folks were like, well, my neighbors don't speak to me. Well, these aren't my neighbors. And if you're going to come into this community, not as high as my property taxes are, and me mug, and you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I pay my property taxes just like anybody else. And I think, we've got to really start to fix these narratives, because you're seeing them play out, not just with officer-involved shootings, but you're seeing it played out with politics. Like their lives are being played with.
That's right.
And you can't play with lives when they're on the line. And so I think there's got to be a real heart-to-heart, but I think it all starts with people really seeing us, you know. And I thought that the way that Ava DuVernay named that, "When They See Us," was so powerful, because we all we look differently once you get a chance to sit down and talk to us.
Yeah.
But as much as folks say, because I mean, I feel like for us, we're kind of told to intermingle with the majority population, and folks within that population don't necessarily have to come out because that bubble's already been built. You know, where we have to come out, and when we come out, we have to come out and conform.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous, because you can't say that, because I've had some people try to say, well, Dante, you're not one of them. What does one of them mean?
Yeah, what does it mean?
You see what I'm saying? Like, I see an issue with being divided.
Well, I only reason why I speak in terms, and some people will say I speak in divisive language, but I only speak in black and white terms sometimes, because I do understand that that's what the media creates. And I do understand that as a young white kid in America, I got this from speaking with my white friends from Colgate. That's their interaction with us. TV, the news, the media. That's all they know about us. A lot of times they never sat down and had that heart-to-heart conversation. It's awkward to have that conversation, you know, for a young black man and a young white man to sit down and have that real conversation that's going to create some real understanding. It doesn't happen by talking. You got to come over here and you got to hang with me. You got to see that everybody with a tattoo on their face ain't, you know, macho. You got to see that everybody with a felony, you know, aren't criminals. You see what I'm saying? And even if they did do something bad on one day, you got to be around us enough to know that they're just like you. They're just like your kids.
I mean, let me ask you this question: how many felonies was MLK and many of the civil rights movement folks charged with?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. And you know, the difference is that was at a time when the thought of having to be on their side of the fence in order to make it wasn't as big, because you could set up a black business in a black neighborhood and you can survive and thrive off of, you know, black consumership. Whereas now the felony is it's like the entrance. You coming into the basketball game without a ticket. It's like you're walking into the stadium of white America and you got an F stamped on your ticket. You can't get in there. But now it's not as many black businesses. So people like me and you, a lot of us we depend on white America letting us in when we finally put on our suits and ties.
That's true. But you know, the crazy thing is, the older I get, the more I realize it's not even just a white America and a black America. It's a global place, a global platform that we're on. You know, I'm getting calls to speak in other countries about the work that I'm doing here. And, you know, sometimes I'll sit over there and I'll talk to my wife and say, man, I feel like in other countries I'm getting opportunities that don't necessarily open up here. But it's, man, you got to get in where you fit in, but also understanding that this world is round, you know? Like, China's not just doing business with China. You know, the brother that gave all that money away at Morehouse, I mean, he made a lot of money off doing business in China. And so I think it's about understanding, for us, understanding business. And I mean,
and we're not being caught up under the stigma, because even though we're talking about, you know, these very real barriers, it's still up to you to take no for an answer. I never took no for an answer. You know what I mean? I just didn't take it for an answer. I didn't go to Colgate and lash out because I didn't really understand what was going on. You know, I may have not associated as much as I should, but I got what I went up there for.
That's true.
I went to Colgate. I came back with a degree, and I came back with a strong black woman. And I married my sister. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I look at myself and say, that's what I went up there for. I met my wife there, and I got my degree there. That degree was the foundation of higher education for me. And even after I went to jail, even after I made a lot of mistakes, when I stacked on top of that foundation with law school, that foundation was still there. So I was able to put law school on top of a Colgate degree. You know, and all the mistakes I made, you know, were diminished because I did have that degree already. You know, so I'm thankful for every decision that I made and all the avenues that led me there. And I can't say that, you know, it wasn't white people who was along that path, because very important people in my life were white people. And sometimes it's some white people who pulled me to the side when I was on the way to do some very dumb things. And there was a white man who told me about Colgate. You know what I mean? So you know, and he was kind of like, still to this day, it's like a father to me. You know what I mean? So if anybody thinks that I have a racist heart, you know, you'd have to really look at who I deal with and who I love on a daily basis.
I don't think it's that you have. I don't think you have a racist heart. I think we're just talking about. We're having a conversation that you don't typically see being had.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's live, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's. So a lot of people talk about what Russia did in the election, but until we start having these conversations, because I sit down with a lot of people that don't look like me, and we sit down and have some conversations. I was at a business meeting, and they talked about just kind of how they were feeling about affirmative action. I said, but we've also, you know, affirmative action wouldn't have been needed had a lot of black businesses been able to thrive.
That's right.
Like there, you know. There were communities that were burnt down because they weren't protected. So we have to be very honest about these conversations and really saying, but I mean, when I look at you, when I look at me, when I look at the legacy that we're leaving for our children, you know, what are they going to be able to do with the foundation that we're building for them?
Absolutely.
And I think that is so important. I think that's why it was so important just to have you on, because you allow. I think you paint a great picture of it's not really about where you come from, but it's about what your perspective on life is and what you do with it.
That's right. And my kids will never know a world where black people aren't supposed to be prosecutors, right?
Yeah.
They think that's just the way it's supposed to be because that's what their dad did.
Yeah.
That's the world I want to create. I would like to perpetuate young men and young women. You know who has the power? You see When They See Us, that movie? You know who had the power in that movie to send those kids home?
Yeah.
The prosecutor. Prosecutor could have stopped it.
Yeah.
Right there, and could have sent those kids home. So the prosecutor had the most power in that situation.
So let me ask you this: as a former prosecutor, what do you think may have been a contributing reason to why they didn't stop it?
It's political. It's political. People want, you know, there are victims involved. There are alleged victims involved. There are witnesses, real witnesses. Then there are alleged witnesses. There's sometimes the conflicts in testimony creates an environment where a person who wants to believe something can find enough to believe what they want to believe. And from that point on, ego jumps in and they want to justify it. I often say when I'm dealing with prosecutors, I gotta make them give up the bone first.
Yeah.
Which means that now you've taken on. This is your fight now. This isn't about the state of Georgia versus my client. You've made it up in your mind that my client did something, and you don't want to let the bone go. So your boss may be willing to let the bone go and say, hey, listen, give them probation or dismiss the case. But you've made it personal now. You don't want to tell me for some reason or give the paperwork to me or announce it in court. Whatever it may be, it becomes personal. So what happened in that case was it became personal.
Wow.
And I'm not going to try to read what's on a person's heart.
Yeah.
All I know is that the race element made it easier. You see what I'm saying? Race made it easier. It wasn't that you wanted to go out and harm black people, right? But was it easier to throw black lives away?
Yeah.
Did you value those lives? We know that they don't have the same value. Why? Because during that same time, black men were killing black men in the street like it was nothing. Not even black people really understood the value of a black life to this day. Not even black people really value black lives. So how can they value a black life when everything that they're being taught is telling them that a black life is worth less? So that's what happened. I think it was a personal decision to look away, and it was racism, all undertones all throughout it, because the value of those lives weren't as much because they were young black lives.
Wow.
That's what it was.
Man, that's deep, and it's deep because you just understand. Because I read a book, and it's called Brainwashed, and it just talks about So essentially, it says that before there was ever slavery, before it was ever a concept, there was a PR campaign to raise awareness to the public that, hey, you can get this work in America done for free. Here's how. And it's like, and then you understand how it wasn't just a PR campaign, but it was laws that was written around it, you know. And when you start to see the number that was done, I mean, I think that's when it really, because I mean, all that stuff has trickled down to where we are now, you know. I mean, some of the same issues that, you know, people are fighting against with Black Lives Matter. I mean, the same thing Dr. King and Malcolm X and them were speaking about. I mean, same issues, different era, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, it's deep. But, man, I think it says a lot to why people like you are needed, you know, to really fight for the people. You
Well, I
know?
appreciate that, man. I appreciate it. This is my cause. This is what I do every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's my birthday. You know, instead of waking
yeah.
up to celebrate my birthday, I went to get a young man out of jail this morning. You know, and I pride myself on doing that. You know,
You couldn't wait to let me wish you a happy birthday, huh?
I mean, hey man,
I was trying to end it on the bang, and you know, I was trying to end it on the bang, but I see. But no, man, I really appreciate you coming in here on your birthday. It is Will Arnold's birthday. Happy birthday to Will, man. We're so grateful that you came in to join us. And you guys, my name is Dante Carter. We were joined by Will Arnold right here on Beyond the Brand on Hits 92.3.